I'd like to begin this morning. My name's Peter Stoichev. I'm the president of the university. It's a great privilege to be able to say that and to be able to say a few words to you this morning on this very important occasion. I want to thank our guests who are here from out of the province, who have traveled a long way to join us for this important occasion. I'd like to thank Betty McKenna for the pipe ceremony. For all who attended that, thank you so very much. You'll be hearing from our knowledge keeper, good friend of mine, from whom I learn something every day, Eugene Archond, a little later in the program. And it's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to this important announcement. And it's an announcement about work that will help strengthen Indigenous health research across Canada. This event is being live streamed. So a special welcome to those of you who are watching this national announcement at various locations across the country. Thank you very much for joining us as well. We acknowledge, and this is the language that we use at this university, that we are on Treaty 6 territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis. We pay our respects to our First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. We're delighted that two CIHR officials from Ottawa are joining us today. A special welcome to Stephen Mitchell, Senior Advisor to the CIHR Vice President of Research and Knowledge Translation, and to Jacques Dalton, Associate for Institute Strategic Initiatives, and Assistant Scientific Director of the Institute, Earl Nalgesic. I'd like to acknowledge as well that my colleagues, Vice President Karen Chad and Deborah Patsega Osborne are here. Candace Waskas-Laverty, the Senior Director of Indigenous Engagement, who is responsible for how well run and how important this beautiful venue is. Thanks, Candace, Karen, and Deborah for being here as well. I see also that we have some leading CIHR-funded researchers and representatives from the CIHR-funded Saskatchewan Centre for Patient-Oriented Research, better known as SCIPR, based on our campus. Thank you all for being here as well. Back in 2015, the University of Saskatchewan was honored to host a national forum, Building Reconciliation, Universities Answering the TRC's Calls to Action. The TRC report and its calls to action had just been released in draft form. It was a two-day event for Canadian university presidents and their leadership teams, for Aboriginal student leaders across the country, Aboriginal scholars, and scholars dedicated to research that is meaningful to Indigenous people. Knowledge keeper Eugene Archond, who served as the Saskatchewan representative to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, played a key role in that first national forum, helping our university to chart a path to ensure that we are doing everything we can to be the best place we can possibly be with Indigenous students and Indigenous communities. He has been a good friend and advisor to the university, and I'd now like to invite Eugene to the podium to offer some grounding remarks for today's announcement. Thank you, Eugene.
Hey, Peter. Watawi no mamau te peitsege nasko mau te laki oi pe to taigoak. E wai nasko mau me now uspagan squel e wai tansan uskapeu squel kapeu isita sut. E kaki o mo te kape tohte miasin mi jet squel mo te atse. So I acknowledge the Creator bringing us all together today. Thank the Elder Betty for raising her pipe for all of us this morning. And that was the prayers that was conducted in the circle. Also, the young lady was Oskap Elskwell. And all of you for being here, especially so many women. And I say that because today's an important lesson in the beginning of this celebration that it was conducted by a woman. Colonization has changed us from a matriarchal society to a patriarchal society. And we all have a role to change that back to what it was for us as Indigenous people, and to blend contemporary ways to our ways, because no man, it has to be understood by us, can give life. Only woman can give life. Only the Creator can take life. It's an important lesson for us each day. Now, I want to get to what we're doing. Thank you, Peter, for the kind introduction. I really enjoy your company also, so it's a symbiotic relationship. And I bring up symbiotic because with what we're doing here, the tremendous work that Carrie and her people have put together, it can't be a collaborative relationship. Collaborative puts one above another, and symbiotic definition is it's mutually beneficial. And as this journey begins, I don't celebrate it as a time of a new beginning. I look at it from where I come from as a residential school survivor that we're 100 years too late. And I'm more interested in what happens with this in the proactive way that it can be used for that little guy that's in that picture. That's why we do what we do. I've had an opportunity to work with several academic institutions across the country, and I have observed barriers in the last 5 years on new initiatives that try and blend Indigenous thinking, Nehio Mamtanitsagan, with academic and contemporary thinking, and I've seen pushback. This is not a time for pushback. This is a time to nurture a baby so that the legacy of this program with the University of Saskatchewan can go on for generations. And it's important to be always aware of what pushback is. It usually goes under the guise of systemic barriers. Well, systemic barriers are human beings who can't take change. And every society has to ask these human beings that are resistant to change, healthy change, to remove themselves from that path, because systemic barriers are human barriers and human beings stopping progress. It's important that we share that with you because it is part of our worldview. It's not to destroy or to hurt, but if you're not going to help the cause, please get out of the way and let the warriors take over so that our mothers and our grandmothers and our kokums can take care of our future generations. I ask all of you humbly, if you're in this room, and if you have influence outside of this room, use that influence constructively, not hurtfully. And that this research that's conducted on the people that are most researched on this continent is Indigenous people. Don't use that research simply to add more letters to your name. Continue with advocacy and change, real change. You all know, you're all smart people, that the status quo is not sufficient. Thank you all very much. I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words and share a few thoughts. My comments are meant to hurt no one, but I take nothing back. Hi, hi.
Thank you, Eugene, for your thoughtful remarks. There's always many things every time Eugene speaks that we can take away. Use influence constructively, a powerful message. Thank you, Eugene. As a university serving a province with one of the highest percentages of Indigenous people in the country, indigenization and reconciliation are part of our core mission. We would not be able to move on that core mission at all if it were not for the Indigenous communities, knowledge keepers, elders, students, faculty, who helped to make that happen. It would otherwise be impossible, and we'd be doing it the wrong way. We're proud to host the Institute of Indigenous Peoples Health, one of 13 of the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, which is what we're here to hear about today. The Institute of Indigenous Peoples Health, led by Dr. Carrie Barassa, relocated to the University of Saskatchewan last October. It is the world's first federal health research funding institute dedicated to Indigenous peoples' health. Under Dr. Barassa's visionary leadership, this institute is building on the strengths of our growing University of Saskatchewan hub of Indigenous health research and advancing our efforts to work in partnership with Indigenous communities to improve health outcomes, both here in Saskatchewan and across Canada, and that's what you will be hearing about from Dr. Barassa. It is undeniable that there are serious health inequities that exist among Indigenous people in comparison to the general Canadian population. These are rooted in complex historic and contemporary disparities. But we must work together to close the gap between Indigenous health outcomes and those of the rest of Canada. That's why the work of this institute is extremely important to this province and to Canada. One of our main takeaways from that Building Reconciliation Forum 3 years ago was that when it comes to research aimed at addressing serious health inequities and working with Indigenous communities to find solutions, the underlying principle must always be nothing about us without us. This new National Strategic Plan for Indigenous Health Research that Dr. Barassa is about to share with you is a testament to this vitally important principle. A health research agenda driven by the needs of Indigenous communities. To close the gap in health disparities and bring about health transformation in Indigenous communities, it is going to take both Indigenous and non-Indigenous ways of knowing, the integration of modern Western medicine with traditional Indigenous wellness practices. This university aims to be the university the world needs, and hosting this institute with its exciting new plan contributes significantly to that aim. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Barassa. Dr. Carrie Barassa earned her master's and PhD in political science and social studies respectively at the University of Regina, and then spent more than 15 years as a professor of Indigenous Health Studies at the First Nations University of Canada. She's a member of the College of New Scholars, Artists, and Scientists of the Royal Society of Canada. She is a public member of the Royal College Council of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada, and she is a board member of the Saskatchewan Health Quality Council. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Barassa.
What a great day. I have to collect my emotions, which I always get the better of me, so forgive me. I want to thank all of you for coming here. This is a day for community. And I am so honored to be here, and I'm honored to launch this strategic plan that is for community, driven by community. And this is a plan that is about self-determination, and it is about reconciliation. And I'm really honored to be part of this. I want to thank the elders this morning, Elder Betty for leading the pipe ceremony, and for the Elders Council. We have an Elders Council that serves our institute, our staff, and doors are opening all the time. We have immense leadership from CHR, from the senior management, from our new president, from our senior management, and all through CHR. Things are transforming at a rapid rate, more than I ever imagined when I took on this role. And I know that is because of ceremony. It is because of our ancestors. It is because of all the prayers of the elders that we put down, because we have spirit in the work that we do. And that is vitally important. And that is why I believe that this strategic plan is going to change the lives of Indigenous people in Canada. Research can be transformative when it is driven by Indigenous communities. And that is the time. Now is the time. This is the time. And I am really honored to be able to present this to you today. And this is certainly not about me at all. This is about communities and about what communities have been asking for a very, very long time. So I'm not going to share the entire presentation. You'll see that I'm flipping through, but it will be available online, so you'll be able to see everything, all the details, but I do want to just share the highlights of the plan. And I do want to say that I've been really welcomed into Treaty 6 territory warmly, but I think that everybody has duly shared the land acknowledgement. So we are sharing today both the action plan, our strategic plan, but also a bit of an action update. Every year we provide an Indigenous health research update to the communities that we serve, and so this is a combination today. So, as you might know, when I became the scientific director, following in some big shoes from Dr. Jeff Redding and Dr. Malcolm King, and thank you for being here today, Malcolm, we're tasked with the action plan. And so you can see I'm just going to highlight a few of what I see to be some really key elements. And one of those key elements that we have to deliver on is to increase our investments from the entirety of CIHR's budget to a minimum of Indigenous health research of 4.6%. And so we report on where we're at and what is our progress being made in terms of that investment. In order to do that, we also had to figure out, when I came on board about 2 years ago, almost 2.5 now, how were we going to decide that? How would you define what Indigenous health research is? So we brought together an external reference group of Indigenous researchers, non-Indigenous researchers who were working in Indigenous health, and then we came up with a new definition of Indigenous health research so that we could have a baseline in terms of, well, where were we at? And as you can also see, we also implemented an iterative peer review. So because we know in the open competitions, Indigenous people were not having high rates of success in terms of peer review, and that's because most people do not understand Indigenous health research methodologies or Indigenous health research in general. So you had peer reviewers who had no idea what kind of work we were doing, and then that we weren't getting funded. So those were some of the highlights. Now, in terms of governance and strategic leadership, as I said, we had a new culturally safe safe definition in terms of what does that mean in terms of cultural safety, what does that mean when you're coming to apply to funding opportunities. Why? Because we want to prioritize Indigenous health researchers. We need to build capacity, whether you're an Indigenous person, or whether you're an ally working in the Indigenous health field. Full stop, we need to build capacity. We also have an IIPH Institute IAB. This was reconstituted, and for the first time in CIHR history, we actually have an Indigenous elder on our IAB. And we need to create more space. We need more elders on our committees, on our IABs. Why do we need more elders? Well, because think of it this morning. We started with a pipe ceremony with our elders, with our knowledge keepers, who are, in our communities, you could say, our PhDs. We need that knowledge. It is vitally important. And CIHR is now starting to create that space. We are opening that culturally safe space. We have increased Indigenous representation on our IABs as well, our Institute Advisory Boards. They are vitally important boards, but we also need to have Indigenous knowledge. We also have our Indigenous Health Research Support Unit. It is now fully staffed. We have, and Jacques Dalton is here, and so Jacques is one of those members, and they play a vitally important role to support the work that we do. And we also, of course, have our strategic plan that maps out 4 directions over the next 5 years. We also have a new president who is extremely supportive of Indigenous health research and the Indigenous health research agenda. In fact, in terms of our strategic plan, he is taking this strategic plan and embedding it in the overall CHR strategic plan, which is phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. It shows the dedication that CHR has to Indigenous health research. And he has also opened up channels with the NIOs, particularly Inuit Tapurek Kanatami, and he has had several meetings with President Nathan Obed, and he's building relationship with other Indigenous communities and understanding that Indigenous communities must lead the Indigenous health research agenda in Canada. And he's also building engagement with a variety of the NIOs, including Native Women's Association of Canada and the National Aboriginal Friendship Centers. So in terms of our increased investment, this year we have increased the investment by $5 million, which it looks small when you have it in a percentage, 0.3%. But remember, when I came in, our baseline was about 2% of the overall investment. And so now our investment is at 3.3%. It's not where we want to be. We want to get to 4.6%. And in fact, we actually want to get to 4.9% because that's actually the total of the Indigenous population in Canada. But we are making strides. And I think some of the investments coming out this next year, you're going to see a pretty big jump by the time we do our update next year. So we are getting there, and we know it's not time to pat ourselves on the back, but we're getting there. Sorry, of course, of all days, I have dry mouth today. So one of our large investments, you probably are aware of this, are the network environments for Indigenous health research. And when I became the scientific director, one of the very first things that we heard from community was bring back the NEARs. And the NEARs were originally the network environments for Aboriginal health research. And they were based mostly in the academy. And what we heard was, if you're going to bring back the NEARs, the communities want to have the say. The communities want to drive these investments. And so we have really kind of flipped this around. And this is not to say that we do not need academics, Indigenous or otherwise. We can't do this without the academy. But the way that we're flipping it is that the communities have to be driving this agenda, whether it's the Indigenous research agenda writ large or whether it's with the NEARs. But this is a $100.8 million 16-year investment. It is one of the largest investments CHR has ever made, particularly for Indigenous health research. And I have to say that all of my colleagues, all of the scientific directors invested in this, and it was a unanimous approval. And that hasn't happened before. So this is a major, major investment. This is about capacity building, and this is to establish a national network, and it is focused on privileging Indigenous research methodologies, privileging Indigenous knowledges, and if communities wish, they can hold the funds. And that is new, it is innovative, and it speaks directly to self-determination and reconciliation. So the other pieces I think that are really important to speak about is that when we did our community engagement, the first thing when I came on as scientific director is I knew that I could not set a research agenda. It was not my role to do that. The communities had to set that agenda. And so we didn't get a laundry list of issues or deficit-focused kinds of research, around, diabetes or anything like that. I mean, communities live that every single day. They know what the issues are. But what we heard from them were things around self-determination, and I have a slide about it. But what it really was about was, setting the agenda. They want capacity building. They want to have the ability to hold funds. And so we heard sort of a bit of a list of barriers to research. And so we have really tried to address those, and we tried to address them in a timely manner. And so, 2 years in, this is what we've been able to do. Indigenous communities and individuals are now able to hold grants. And that means whether you're an elder, a knowledge keeper, an Indigenous academic, an Indigenous community, you are able now to hold grants. I think that is a phenomenal accomplishment, and that is thanks to the good work at CIHR and the community saying this is what we need. And so I think that is going to set a new tone in terms of Indigenous health research and new opportunities. It doesn't mean communities have to, it means they have the option. And isn't that the very essence of self-determination? There's also a new free-flowing CV. We heard, from communities saying, well, it's one thing to hold grants, but it's another one to try and tackle that CCV application. And, so how are we going to do that? And so thanks to some innovation, there's a free-flowing CV. It's 3 pages long. You don't have to list your publications. It's simply, speak about, the skills that you have that speaks to the kind of research you want to do. So it's just a simple Word document, and we are soliciting feedback on it. What works, what doesn't work? Does it need to be longer? Does it need to be shorter? Is there fields missing? But at least it's a start, and it will provide us the feedback we need to change it as we go along. But it's certainly, you don't need a PIN number, you don't have to log in. It's a Word document. And so probably that will be something that I think communities can work with, and I don't think would need very limited help for sure. We also have iterative peer review. This is, I think, a very simple process, and communities get feedback. We have appropriate reviewers. If you have a project that maybe needs a little bit of tweaking on the methodology or the ethical piece, you have maybe 6 to 8 weeks, and then you send it back, and you have really applicable feedback. And so we've had really excellent results out of this, and much higher success rates with iterative peer review for Indigenous proposals. We're also working on indirect grants, because what we've heard is, okay, great, Carrie, now we can hold grants, perfect, now we've got the new CV, okay, but the fact is that if we're a community and we're holding grants, we need, the kind of indirect grants that maybe academics would get if they were in a university setting. Well, with the CIHR Act, we can't just open up the Act and start to address that. That's not something that can happen. But we are working on this, and we're trying to do this in a manner where it is in partnership with the other funding agencies. So we hear you, it's important, we're working on it, and it's something that we're doing due diligence, but we need a little bit more time. So it's on our radar, it is going to happen. It might not be in the exact same manner as an academic institution, but it is on our radar. And the other piece, again, I want to reinforce is that we still desperately need the partnerships with the academy. You are very important. And so it is figuring out the balance between, yes, communities need to be driving the research agenda, but we also have to have those partnerships with the academy and figuring out that balance and what that looks like. So I just wanted to mention, the investments that we have across the board, not only out of IIPH, but the partnership that we have with the other institutes, and ensuring that, Indigenous research isn't just happening out of IIPH, it's happening across the various institutes. So we have launched, out of IIPH, we have launched, for example, the Pathways Component 3 project. We have Indigenous Research Nursing, chairs in nursing. But we also, of course, have the team grants and Indigenous Healthy Life Trajectories. We have the Sport Capacity Development Initiative. We have Transitions in Care. Those are all partnership-oriented projects. And our vision is really, ultimately, simply to improve the health and well-being of Indigenous communities by supporting innovative research programs based in scientific excellence, but led by Indigenous communities. And that is ultimately about self-determination. So in terms of our overview, it was through the guidance of our Institute Advisory Board, Indigenous communities, elders, knowledge healers, and as I said, we had community engagement sessions, and I just want to flip through this. Oh, I did want to say that this was in line with both the UNDRIP and with the TRC. I want to be explicit about that. But ultimately, this was our process. So we went across the country. We did 12 grassroots engagement sessions. We were in urban communities. We were on reserves. We were in Métis communities. We tried our best with our sort of shoestring budget to have as many engagements as possible. We also conducted interviews. We had some surveys. We did some telephone and Skyping. We did as much as we possibly could. Would I have liked to do more? Yes, but we did the best that we could. And that informed the strategic plan. And so I just want to highlight the recurring themes that came out of it. As I mentioned, we didn't get a laundry list. What we heard was self-determination. This is what communities wanted. We heard about capacity development and infrastructure. We heard about, we don't want deficit research. We want to talk about wellness and strength and resilience of the communities. And of course, we heard about the NEARS. So I just want to briefly say that we are aligned with the old CHR plan, the roadmap, and I want to just focus and close basically by saying these are our 4 strategic priorities, and yes, they do correspond with indicators, outcomes, and strategies. You can see that in the full plan, but basically it is to having communities drive the priorities and the health knowledge translation, and to contribute by using multiple Indigenous and non-Indigenous research paradigms simultaneously, and really to advance beyond the sort of acknowledged notions of health equity. We want to give primacy to wellness, strength, resilience, and we want to do that through privileging Indigenous knowledge. And then encourage Indigenous community-based health research networks to develop across the country. So I just want to say I need to really acknowledge our Elders Council. They have always been there for us. They put prayers out. If we need a phone call, they're there. And I want to also thank the key informants, the people that spent time with us in the community, the elders and the knowledge keepers, the CHR staff, our IAB. We could not do any of this without them. And so just to conclude, I think that in the next 5 years, we're committing to increasing the number of researchers of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis ancestry. We can't do this without Indigenous people telling us what their needs are, telling us where we're going wrong, ensuring that we take the lead from them. And of course, to just really focus on the strengths and the resilience, because we know that communities have the answer. They know the answers, and all we have to do is start asking them. And I say this a lot at CHR. CHR, we have to listen more and speak less. I say that a lot, and it's the truth. And we will continue our partnerships with other governmental and non-governmental organizations. And that's it for me. Chimigwech.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barasa. We're so fortunate that you and your team are here at the U of S. And thank you for your and CIHR's commitment to reducing barriers for Indigenous communities to engage in research, advocating for increased investment, advocating for academy partnerships, improving the health and well-being of Indigenous communities, and supporting self-determination, the main points that I took from that presentation. Thank you so very, very much for your commitment to all of these. For the community perspective, I'd now like to invite Margaret Kiskop-Piesis of the CIHR-funded All Nations Hope Network in Regina, a collective of Indigenous people, organizations, and agencies focused on HIV, AIDS, and hepatitis C.
Good morning. I am kind-hearted warrior woman. I'm that warrior the knowledge keeper talked about earlier, and filled with emotion today because it's a beautiful day for the Indigenous people of the land and the people that came here from those other countries on this land, the settlers. It's a beautiful day to be able to acknowledge the work that we can do together. We see solutions as Indigenous people, and as we move forward, I'm from a network. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of All Nations Hope Network here in Saskatchewan. And I'm from this land. I'm from my mother and my grandmother and my great-grandmother and so on right up to the universe. And that's who I am as an Indigenous Kisqueyo. And as we lead forward and begin to acknowledge what we need to do here, Indigenous people have been doing research since the beginning of time on this land. This is nothing new to our people. And so as CIHR opens this up for Indigenous people to be able to look for the solutions for what we face here today on this land, we welcome that. And we're very humbled, and we appreciate what has been done here and the work that our Carrie Barasa has done to open those doors for the Indigenous people of the land, and to work alongside the allies that come here from other nations to come and help us with the solutions. But as we move forward as Indigenous people, we see that one vision, that forwardness as Indigenous people that we have to follow to begin to solutionize what we face here today on this land. And so I'm very grateful and thankful today for having the opportunity to share with you as an Indigenous-led organization, a board of members from the land here. They are governing us and leading us at All Nations Hope, and they hold my arms up when I get tired, and they support the work that we do at All Nations Hope and research with Indigenous people and communities. And so I'm thankful for that today, to be able to sit and to talk and to look and to plead with the Creator and our ancestors for the solutions that lie right here on the land for the people. And we welcome again the allies that came here to help us and the academics that will come alongside us. Today I'm very pleased with the work that has been done with CIHR, and I look forward to new initiatives as we begin to look for solutions for the Indigenous peoples of the land. Hi, hi.
Thank you very much, Margaret, for your powerful words. And they bring the formal part of this event to a close. I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Please stay and enjoy refreshments. And most importantly, meet with the Institute's staff, and our speakers, as I understand it, will now gather for photographs and will then be available for media interviews. Thank you so much, and everybody watching live streamed, for participating in this important event today. And thank you, Dr. Barasa.